She steps out of the school bathroom, each footstep punctuating the tense silence of the hallway. Blood stains the bottom of her skirt, dripping slowly as she walks. But there is no rush, no panic. Before we continue the story, comment what city you're watching us from. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications if you enjoy stories like this. The distant wail of sirens starts to grow louder, and yet, she moves with the same measured calmness, as if she has already resigned herself to what's happening. Ivana Carter, 17 years old, new to Keller High in Maple Oak, Georgia. Quiet, soft-spoken. People had already labeled her as the shy girl, the one who sat alone at lunch, the one who didn't have much to say. But they hadn't seen what was inside her, what she could hold back, what was simmering beneath the surface. In the hallway, eyes follow her, whispering. The air hangs heavy with confusion, disbelief. No one can quite figure out how this happened. How a girl who'd just shown up at this school a few days ago, a girl who just wanted to blend in, ended up in the middle of this scene. She doesn't flinch, doesn't pause to adjust the cross hanging from her neck, stained now with the residue of a battle she never asked for. The walls are lined with students, some frozen in place, others pulling out their phones, already filming. Some are scared. Some are waiting to see what she'll do next. In the back of her mind, Ivana hears the low hum of voices, but they don't matter. She doesn't care. What had started as a normal day, a day like any other, had turned into something she never saw coming. One moment, she was in the bathroom, trying to wash the red from her hands. The next, she was walking out of that bathroom, every eye locked on her as though they were waiting for the next move in some twisted game. Her shoes make no sound on the floor. It's almost like time is moving too slowly, every second dragging as her footsteps echo, the rhythm of her pulse matching the tension building in the air. Her eyes don't look up as she walks past the crowd, as if she doesn't see them, because she doesn't need to. They don't matter. The sirens are closer now. The flashing lights will come soon. But they won't stop her. Not anymore. She's been underestimated before. Her whole life, actually. People like to assume they know who you are based on the way you look or the way you speak. They like to write your story for you, fill in the blanks where they think they have all the answers. But no one knew Ivana Carter. Not really. Not the real her. They didn't know what it meant to push her, to test her, to corner her. They didn't know that beneath the quiet, beneath the stillness, there was a fire that couldn't be contained. A fire that wasn't going out until she decided it was time. It wasn't just about defending herself anymore. It was about something deeper, something they couldn't understand. Ivana Carter had moved to Maple Oak for a reason. She had come to Keller High to escape her past, to leave behind the remnants of a life that had been too full of grief and loss. She came here looking for a fresh start, but she didn't know that fresh starts weren't always as peaceful as they seemed. She didn't ask for this fight. She didn't want it. All she wanted was peace. She just wanted to be left alone, to blend in, to find a place to heal. But that wasn't going to happen, not when people like Reagan Holloway, the cheerleading captain, the queen bee, the girl who had it all, decided Ivana was an easy target. Reagan didn't know what she was dealing with. No one did. And now, as Ivana walks past them all, there's only one thing left in her mind. This is her moment. She passes the first few lockers, each row filled with eyes that flicker nervously between her and the door at the end of the hallway. They think they've seen what they need to see. They think they know what happened. But they haven't seen the truth. The truth about Ivana Carter. The truth about how far she's willing to go to protect herself. And as the sirens grow louder, her resolve hardens. She doesn't stop. She doesn't flinch. Not once. She's walked this path before, and the outcome will be no different this time. She walks out of the school and into the unknown. Because in that moment, she has nothing left to lose. What do you think is worse, being the new kid or being underestimated? Drop your answer in the comments and hit the subscribe button for more. The streets of Detroit had been too loud, too raw for Ivana for as long as she could remember. The city was full of memories of her brother, Jaden Carter, who had been more than just a sibling. He had been her protector, her shield, and her biggest supporter. A Marine, fiercely loyal to his country and his family. But in the end, it wasn't a street fight or a bad decision that took him from her. It was war. The knock at the door came at midnight, and Ivana knew before she even answered that it was him. The moment she opened it, there was a letter. And in the letter was the devastating truth. Jaden had been killed in a raid in the Middle East. Ivana's world crumbled. Her rock, her foundation, was gone. She found herself staring at the door, trying to breathe through the sting of tears that burned her eyes, but the pain was suffocating. Her brother was the one who had promised her that no one would ever hurt her. He was the one who had taught her to defend herself, who had trained her in hand-to-hand combat when she was still a little girl, who had stood between her and the world when it came for her. And now he was gone. Her mother, a devout woman with a deep faith in God, had been broken too. But as much as the pain hurt, as much as it threatened to pull them under, her faith didn't waver. She prayed daily for strength, for peace, for healing. She pulled Ivana close, whispering words of comfort. "We are not alone, baby. God is with us. He will see us through." And so, Ivana's mother packed their lives into suitcases, took Ivana's hand, and moved them to Maple Oak, Georgia, a small town where the sun shone a little brighter and life seemed to move at a slower pace. She hoped the change of scenery would be enough to start over, to build a new life. But there was nothing easy about it. Keller High wasn't the kind of place that made it easy to blend in. It was an affluent, mostly white school where money and status ruled the halls. The students had everything: the latest clothes, the nicest cars, the perfect lives. And then there was Ivana, wearing thrift store clothes, carrying an old backpack, and holding on to a deep, quiet strength that she didn't even know how to explain. She was one of only 3 black students, and the weight of her difference was heavy on her shoulders. She just wanted peace, a chance to walk through the halls unnoticed. But life didn't work like that. The first time she walked through those doors, the eyes on her burned like hot coals. Reagan Holloway, the cheer captain and daughter of the mayor, was at the front of the pack, her perfect blonde hair shining under the fluorescent lights. Reagan, who had everything: beauty, power, influence. She was the queen of the school, and Ivana? She was the outcast, that other. Reagan was the type of girl who never had to work for anything. She had money, privilege, and the kind of smile that made boys weak in the knees. But she also had something darker, something sharp. She liked to see people like Ivana squirm. And when she saw her that first day, quiet, awkward, walking in with a backpack that was clearly seen better days, Reagan smirked. She knew, immediately, what she could do. Ivana didn't react. She couldn't. She wouldn't. Instead, she kept her head down, praying under her breath, "Lord, hold me together today." She had learned the hard way that some battles weren't meant to be fought with fists, but with patience and faith. She sat in the back of the classroom. She didn't speak much. She didn't try to make friends. She didn't try to fit in. She just wanted to be invisible, to keep her head down. But Reagan wasn't done. She would never let her be invisible. For the next few days, Reagan found every way she could to make Ivana's life harder. The whispered insults, the snide comments, the cutting remarks that were designed to hurt her in ways that no one could see. "Look at the new girl. Think she's special because she's from Detroit? She'll never fit in here." But Ivana didn't respond. Not once. Each time, she said a silent prayer, hoping the strength she needed would come. She remembered what her brother had taught her about control, about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. "You don't have to prove anything, Ivana," he used to say. "You've got a power that no one can take away from you." But it wasn't just her brother's lessons that kept her calm. It was the faith that had been instilled in her from the moment she could remember. Faith in God. Faith that she was not alone, even when the world seemed to close in around her. She knew the Lord would fight her battles for her in His time, not hers. And so, she stayed silent. The days passed. Every time Reagan looked at her, she saw that smirk, the kind that spoke of someone who had everything and knew it. Reagan didn't know that Ivana was more than she appeared. She didn't know that deep inside, there was a warrior, someone who had learned to fight not just with her hands, but with her heart. Ivana wasn't afraid of Reagan Holloway, but she wasn't going to fight her. Not yet. Have you ever had to bite your tongue and let God fight for you? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The silence in the cafeteria is always heavy. The sound of trays scraping, the low murmurs of students catching up on the latest gossip. But that day, the silence was more suffocating than usual. A storm was building, and everyone in the room could feel it coming. Reagan Holloway was a master at manipulation, and she knew exactly how to play the crowd. The moment Ivana walked into the cafeteria that morning, she could feel Reagan's eyes on her like a predator stalking its prey. It wasn't just the usual snide comments or the whispered remarks. Reagan had gone a step further this time. She had posted a video that was supposed to embarrass Ivana, to tear her down, to make her the punchline of every joke in that school. It showed Ivana walking through the halls that morning, her second-hand clothes wrinkled, her face determined but her eyes still carrying the burden of loss. Reagan's voice, in the background, added a cruel commentary. Isn't it cute how she thinks she belongs here? Look at her. She's just a poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Thinks she's some kind of superhero? More like a wannabe. The video cut to slow-motion shots of Ivana walking, capturing her vulnerability, her quiet strength, and making it seem like a joke. The cruelest part was the final frame, a close-up of Ivana's cross necklace, with Reagan mocking her faith, her struggle. The video was meant to paint Ivana as an outsider, a girl who didn't belong, and it was spreading like wildfire through the school. Ivana saw it. She didn't need anyone to tell her. By lunch, the whispers had already reached her. The video had been shared, liked, commented on. She felt it, the sting of humiliation, but she didn't respond. Not immediately. She kept her head down. She didn't fight. She just carried on with her day as if the weight of the world wasn't pressing down on her chest. She reminded herself, the Lord fights my battles. This is not my fight. But then, Reagan decided she wasn't done yet. She had to push further, had to make Ivana feel the heat of her cruelty. As Ivana sat down at a table in the corner, trying to make herself small, trying to just get through the day, Reagan walked up, a tray in her hands. The cafeteria, full of noise, seemed to go silent in an instant. Reagan smiled that smile, one that was equal parts sweet and wicked, and with a flick of her wrist, slammed her lunch tray onto Ivana's table. The tray tipped over, sending mashed potatoes, gravy, and half-eaten chicken across the floor. The entire cafeteria went quiet. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on the scene, waiting for Ivana to break. For a moment, the only sound was the sharp scraping of the tray against the floor as food splattered across the tiles. Reagan stood there, her arms crossed, watching Ivana with an expression that dared her to react. The room buzzed with anticipation. They all wanted to see how Ivana would respond. But Ivana didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't even flinch. She simply looked at the mess on the floor, her gaze steady and unwavering, then looked up at Reagan. There was a stillness in her, a quiet power that no one could see coming. Reagan's smile faltered as she saw the fire in Ivana's eyes. But she wasn't prepared for what happened next. Ivana stood up slowly, her hands clenched into fists by her side. The cafeteria held its breath. Reagan stepped back, as if unsure of what was about to unfold. And in the dead silence of that moment, Ivana spoke. "Don't touch me again." Her voice was low, controlled, too controlled. It was a warning, a quiet storm that threatened to break loose if provoked any further. Reagan's smirk faltered, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she took a step closer, her eyes narrowing in challenge, as if daring Ivana to take it further. But Ivana didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she wasn't scared. Because in that moment, she wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing for everything she had been through. For her brother. For her mother. For the strength that had been built within her, piece by piece, over years of loss, pain, and faith. You have no idea who I am, Ivana thought, her fingers tightening into fists. A flash of memory hit her. A memory from long ago, from a time when things had been different, before the tragedy, before everything had changed. Her brother Jaden, his voice. This is the last lesson I'll ever teach you, Ivana. You need to learn how to protect yourself, to protect your heart. She remembered how Jaden, a Marine, had trained her, not just in self-defense, but in survival. He had taught her how to use her hands, how to fight, how to endure when the world tried to knock her down. He had shown her the techniques that only the elite fighters knew, how to disarm someone, how to protect yourself from anyone who thought they could break you. He had done it with love, with care, because he wanted her to be strong, to be prepared for anything life could throw at her. You're stronger than you think, Ivana. Remember that. Her eyes locked with Reagan's. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. Ivana didn't need to prove anything. She knew who she was. She knew what she was capable of. But it wasn't time for that fight yet. Not here. Not now. She turned, calmly walking away from the table. Every pair of eyes followed her, unsure of what to make of this new Ivana. And Reagan? She stood there, still frozen, not sure what just happened. The tension was thick in the air, and the rest of the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal chatter. But the whispers of Ivana's quiet power had already started. The moment had changed everything. At this point, what would you do if you were Ivana? Be honest. We're reading, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. The days that followed the lunchroom incident felt like a long, drawn-out breath, held, suspended, waiting for something to snap. The cafeteria's hushed murmurs about Ivana's quiet defiance seemed to echo in every corner of Keller High. Reagan, used to being the queen of the school, wasn't used to someone not playing by her rules. The subtle shift was palpable, but no one spoke about it openly. No, at least not where the adults could hear. The teachers saw the aftermath, the tension in the air, the whispering. But the administration? They did nothing. Reagan's father, Mayor Holloway, was far too influential for anything to change. The school board? His people. The system was rigged, and Ivana knew it. She wasn't surprised, not really. After all, she wasn't the first target of Reagan's cruelty, nor would she be the last. But the lack of action, the sheer disregard for justice, boiled her blood. She wasn't the kind of girl to sit back and let things pass. If the adults weren't going to step up, then maybe she would. That's when the idea came to her. It started small. A note slipped into a locker. An anonymous message left on a bathroom mirror. The kind of quiet, invisible acts that went unnoticed. But they were enough. They were enough to send a message. Ivana began to quietly defend the students who Reagan and her clique picked on. The kids who didn't fit the mold, the kids with odd clothes, the ones with accents, the quiet ones who barely spoke, the ones who just wanted to get through the day without drawing attention. She started leaving anonymous notes, directing them to hidden places where the bullies wouldn't find them. She didn't want recognition. She didn't need thanks. She just wanted to make things right, even if no one ever knew who was doing it. The messages weren't signed. The handwriting wasn't familiar to anyone. Reagan and her friends were confused at first, but it didn't take long for them to realize someone was silently fighting back. Reagan, though, wasn't one to sit quietly and let anyone have the upper hand. She didn't like the idea of being exposed, being made to look weak. And if she couldn't destroy Ivana with public humiliation, Well, then maybe she could destroy her reputation altogether. That's when Reagan set her trap. A new wave of bullying came, targeting a freshman named Marissa Jennings. The quiet, nervous girl had been an easy target for Reagan's crew, and they had cornered her after school, throwing insults, mocking her clothes, her voice. But Ivana wasn't going to let it happen. She had been watching. She knew something had to be done. It happened at the end of the school day. Ivana, dressed in an oversized hoodie and keeping her head low, had snuck into the hallway just as Reagan's group surrounded Marissa. A quick glance over her shoulder confirmed the coast was clear. Ivana moved swiftly, using the self-defense techniques her brother had taught her. She didn't even think about it. She just reacted. In seconds, the bullies were stunned. Some of them knocked back, others caught off guard. But before Ivana could slip away into the shadows, a teacher appeared, and the scene was caught on camera. It wasn't a security camera, no. The bullies had set her up. They knew exactly what they were doing. The video went viral. It showed a masked figure, Ivana, but no one knew it, fighting like a soldier, protecting Marissa from the bullies who thought they could control her. In the video, the masked girl was calm, precise, her movements almost military-like. It was powerful, and it sent a shockwave through Keller High. But the aftermath was immediate. The administration, now with the video in hand, couldn't ignore it any longer. They suspended the masked girl, claiming she had resorted to violence. Reagan and her group of followers made sure the narrative stayed skewed. They told everyone Ivana had gone rogue, that she was some kind of loose cannon, a threat to the peace they'd worked so hard to maintain. Ivana wasn't surprised. It hurt, though, the weight of the accusation, the disbelief. She wasn't the one to lash out. She wasn't the one who wanted violence. But the world had a way of twisting things, of making good people seem like the villains when they stood up for what was right. When Ivana walked into the principal's office, her heart was steady, calm. She knew the truth, and that was enough. She didn't argue. She didn't fight back. When they told her she was suspended for the altercation, she simply nodded. "Okay," she said. And then she stood up, collected her things, and walked out of the office without looking back. As she walked home that afternoon, her thoughts weren't on the suspension. They weren't on Reagan or the bullies. They weren't on the viral video or the shame she might face. No, Ivana's thoughts were on one thing. Her prayer. "Lord, I'm trusting you. Whatever you want me to do next, I'm ready." She felt the weight of it all, the silence, the burden of being misunderstood, the struggles of fighting a battle that no one else seemed to see. But she didn't feel defeated. She didn't feel broken. She felt something else, something stronger. That night, as Ivana knelt beside her bed to pray, the doubts crept in. God, do I keep hiding, or do I let them see the truth? Do I keep fighting for what's right, even if they'll never understand? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew that the next step wasn't about hiding. It was about revealing the strength inside of her, the strength that no one, not even Reagan, could take away. The next day, as Ivana walked into St. Mark's Church, a quiet, peaceful place she had visited only a handful of times since arriving in Maple Oak, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The church was empty except for a few parishioners sitting quietly in the pews. Ivana sat in the back, alone, and whispered a prayer. God, I'm not afraid anymore. If this is the truth you've called me to, then I'll stand. In the silence of the church, Ivana found something she hadn't expected. Peace. A sense of purpose. The storm inside her had calmed, and she knew, deep down, that no matter what happened next, she was going to be okay. Her faith was stronger than anything the world could throw at her. She was ready. Are you enjoying this story so far? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from as we go deeper into the story. Ivana walked back into Keller High with the calm assurance of someone who had faced down their deepest fears and come out on the other side. Her suspension, while a blow to her pride, had only fueled the fire burning inside her. She didn't come back to be passive, to let life roll over her. She came back to stand tall, to let the world see exactly who she was, someone who wouldn't back down. But that morning was different. The air felt heavier, the tension thicker, as if the entire school was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a story that had become larger than life itself. Reagan had been waiting. As Ivana rounded the corner by the lockers, she saw her, Reagan, standing there with her usual entourage, the cheer captain's arms crossed, a smug expression on her face, as if she owned the hallway. Reagan saw her first, and without missing a beat, she stepped toward her. Back again? Reagan's voice dripped with disdain, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Ivana didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had already made up her mind. The last time, she had prayed. She had taken a step back, waiting for the Lord to fight for her. But today? Today, she wasn't waiting. She wasn't going to hold back. The slap came before Ivana even had a chance to think. Reagan's hand connected sharply with her face, the sound echoing through the hallway. But this time, there was no prayer, no silence, no hesitation. Ivana's reaction was swift. Time slowed down as her instincts kicked in. In an instant, her body moved like it had been trained for this moment. There was no wild flailing, no reckless aggression, just precision, just control. Her right hand blocked Reagan's next swing, her body pivoting, shifting the momentum. A swift knee to Reagan's midsection left her gasping for breath. Ivana didn't stop there. A precise elbow to the side knocked the air out of Reagan's lungs, and before she knew it, Ivana had her on the floor. The hallway was silent. Every student, every teacher in the vicinity stopped moving. The sound of Reagan's body hitting the linoleum floor seemed louder than it actually was. But the silence that followed was deafening. Ivana stood over her, her chest rising and falling, her breathing steady but intense. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate the moment. She simply looked down at Reagan, who was staring up at her, eyes wide with shock. The fight hadn't been a fight at all. It had been a lesson, a message. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Maple Oak, Ivana felt something shift deep within her. She wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't the quiet girl who had let everything slide. No, she had just become someone people would remember. Someone who wouldn't let anyone push her down. The tension didn't dissipate, it thickened. Within minutes, the principal was on the scene, flanked by the same security guards who had been watching the viral video in the weeks prior. They tried to pull Ivana aside, but she didn't flinch. She stood tall, unwavering. They told her she was being expelled. They told her this would be the end of her time at Keller High. But then, as they began to escort her down the hallway, something unexpected happened. One of the teachers, Mr. Rogers, an older, military veteran who had always been quietly observant, stepped forward. His gray eyes, sharp with experience, locked onto the principal. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "She's not just a random student." The principal, clearly irritated, frowned. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Rogers glanced at Ivana, his gaze shifting with a newfound understanding. "I've seen that before. Her movements, the precision, the way she handles herself. That's military training. Real training. Not something you just pick up in a self-defense class." He paused, as if weighing the gravity of what he was about to say. "Ivana Carter is not some random student." The words hung in the air. The principal seemed to hesitate for the briefest moment, the weight of what Mr. Rogers was saying sinking in. Reagan, still on the floor, was silent. No one knew what to make of the situation. It wasn't until Ivana, standing quietly at the side, spoke that things began to change. "You're right," she said softly. "I wasn't just trained by anyone. I was trained by my brother." Her voice was steady, the pain of the memory not lost on her. but she kept it together. He was a Marine. He was my protector. He's gone now, but I'll never forget what he taught me. The principal's face softened, just for a second, before hardening again. But it was too late. The truth had already been spoken. The viral video, showing the masked girl defending a freshman, wasn't some anonymous act of rebellion. That girl was Ivana. She had been the one to stand up when no one else would. She had been the one to fight for what was right, even when the world didn't understand. Ivana didn't need to fight anymore. She didn't need to prove herself. What she needed now was to stand firm, to show everyone who had been watching that she was more than what they saw. Did Ivana go too far, or just enough? Type "too far" or "just enough" in the comments. Ivana Carter had become an urban legend in Maple Oak. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She wasn't just the girl who stood up to the cheer captain. She wasn't even just the girl who could fight like a soldier. No, she had become something more, something larger than life. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Students who used to ignore her now watched her, their eyes full of questions, admiration, and fear. Some saw her as a hero, others as a threat. And then there were the ones who saw her as the perfect target. But with the spotlight came darkness. Reagan's father, the mayor of Maple Oak, had used his influence to smear Ivana's name. The video had spread like wildfire, but not in a way anyone could control. It painted her as a dangerous threat, a wild force that had no place in their polished little world. The backlash wasn't just from her classmates anymore. It was coming from the adults, the very people who were supposed to protect her. It wasn't just at school. One Sunday morning, Ivana's mother, a woman of unwavering faith, walked into the church, only to be publicly humiliated by none other than Reagan's mother, Linda Holloway, a woman known for her wealth, status, and connections. "Your daughter," Linda sneered, loud enough for the whole congregation to hear, "is nothing but trouble. A thug, a disgrace to this community." Ivana stood in the back, hearing every word. Her heart pounded in her chest, rage rising like a storm. She wanted to scream, to defend her mother, but she couldn't. Her mother stood still, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. She didn't retaliate. She didn't fight back. Linda's words cut through the air like knives. And still, Ivana's mother stood, unmoving, letting the words bounce off her faith. Ivana wanted to rush forward, to tear Linda's words to pieces, but she didn't. She couldn't. She was stuck in a war between two worlds, one where violence seemed like the only answer, and one where grace and forgiveness were supposed to lead the way. That night, Ivana locked herself in her room. The world outside had become too loud, too much. The weight of everything was crushing her. She felt trapped, suffocated by the expectations, by the weight of her past, by everything everyone had thrown at her. The cross around her neck, the one her brother had given her before he left for duty, hung loosely from her neck. In her anger, in her frustration, she threw it across the room. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed in her heart. For the first time in her life, Ivana didn't want to pray. She didn't want to be strong. She didn't want to forgive. She wanted to give in to the anger that was bubbling inside of her. "Why?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Why did you let this happen to us? Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you stop them from hurting us?" The questions hung in the air, unanswered. The darkness of her soul seemed to suffocate everything else. But then, in the stillness of the night, when all was quiet, Ivana had a dream. She saw him, her brother. He stood before her, the same strong figure he had always been. The soldier, the protector. He smiled at her, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had been lost. It was a smile of understanding. "You don't have to fight like me," he said, his voice calm, full of love. "Fight like you, Ivana. Don't let their hate become yours. You have something stronger inside of you. Fight with your heart. Fight with your faith." You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your own. Ivana woke up, her eyes wide, her chest heaving as though she had been running. The weight, for the first time in what felt like forever, was lighter. But the fight was far from over. The next day, everything came to a head. Reagan, seething from her previous defeat, had orchestrated something new, something even more dangerous. She gathered a group of girls, her friends, her followers, and they waited for Ivana behind the gym after school. The plan was clear. They were going to teach Ivana a lesson. The whole school would watch, and Ivana would be humiliated. This time, it wasn't just one slap. It wasn't just one fight. This time, Reagan had planned for an all-out assault. They were going to jump her, drag her down, show everyone who the true queen bee of Keller High really was. But Reagan didn't know who she was dealing with. Ivana walked out behind the gym, her footsteps steady, her mind clear. The circle of girls parted, and there they were, all of them surrounding her. They were ready, the air thick with anticipation. They knew what they were about to do. But Ivana? She didn't flinch. She stood there alone, calm. She didn't try to act tough. She didn't try to prove herself again. She simply stood her ground. And as the girls closed in, their hands raised, Ivana whispered under her breath, "Lord, I'm not fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for the truth." The moment hung in the balance. The clock seemed to stop, the world holding its breath. CTA number 6. Would you have shown up or stayed away? Drop, I'd show up, or I'd stay away below, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet. The confrontation behind the gym, that final moment when everything collided, was not the violent spectacle everyone had been waiting for. Ivana stood her ground, still and composed, waiting for the chaos to unfold. The girls charged forward, their hands raised in anger, their eyes filled with fury, but Ivana was ready. The years of training with her brother, the precision, the discipline, the control, had molded her into something more than just a fighter. She wasn't here to tear them apart. She wasn't here to destroy. She was here to survive, to protect herself. Each move she made was calculated. A swift block, a controlled strike. She didn't lash out with raw anger, but with careful, practiced defense. She danced around them, using their own force against them. One by one, the girls fell back. They weren't hurt, but they were stunned, shocked by how effortlessly Ivana moved, how easily she turned their attacks against them. And then came Reagan. Reagan, the one who had started it all, the one who had mocked and belittled and tormented, came charging toward Ivana. But this time, Ivana didn't dodge. She didn't need to. Reagan's anger was her downfall. Ivana stepped aside, and with one smooth motion, she sent Reagan to the ground, her back hitting the earth with a thud. The silence was deafening. Reagan lay there, stunned, her breath shallow and ragged. Her tears came quickly, her body trembling as she sat on the ground, overwhelmed, broken. Ivana didn't stand over her, ready to gloat. No, she walked toward Reagan, crouching down slowly. The crowd held its breath. Reagan's eyes were wide, filled with disbelief and shame. She looked up at Ivana, unable to say anything, just staring in silence. Ivana didn't throw any insults. She didn't mock her. She simply said, her voice soft but firm, "You're not my enemy. Hate is." The words hung in the air, as heavy as the stillness that followed. In that moment, everything shifted. News of what had happened spread like wildfire through the school. The video of the fight, though not the one they had expected to see, went viral. But this time, people weren't laughing. They weren't cheering. They were watching in awe. Because this wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson, a demonstration of strength, not just of body, but of spirit. Reagan, broken, was sent to therapy, and the headlines painted her in a different light. The privileged cheer captain who had once ruled over Keller High was now the one seeking help. learning to deal with her own demons. She was no longer the queen bee, she was just a girl who had lost her way. As for Ivana, the world saw her differently now. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was a fighter, a survivor, but more importantly, she was someone who had held on to her faith. Her strength didn't come from the fight she had won. It came from the strength she had inside her to walk away from the hate and not let it define her. It wasn't long before she received an offer that would change her life. A defense academy, one of the best in the country, had seen the video and the discipline in her movements. They offered her a scholarship, an opportunity she never could have dreamed of. But it wasn't just the scholarship that mattered. It was the recognition that her past, her training, her strength had value. She wasn't just the girl who had been bullied. She was the girl who had stood up, fought back, and walked away with grace. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Ivana stood before her church. The congregation had been following her story, the girl who had fought for what she believed in, who had turned the other cheek but also stood her ground. And now, with everything settled, she stood in the same church that had helped her hold on through the storm. With her head held high, Ivana took the microphone, the weight of everything she had gone through heavy in her chest, but her voice strong. She began to speak, her words clear, her heart open. Faith didn't stop the fight, she said, her voice steady. But it stopped me from becoming what they wanted me to become. They wanted me to be bitter, to be angry, to fight with hate. But I chose something different. I chose grace. I chose to walk away from the darkness. I chose to fight with my heart. The room fell silent, and for the first time in a long time, Ivana felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had fought not just for herself, but for her brother's legacy. She had fought for her family, for her faith, and for the future that was now within her grasp. And though the battle was over, her journey was just beginning. Have you ever had to choose grace over revenge? Share your story in the comments. As the final scene fades, leaving a powerful silence in its wake, the air is thick with the weight of what just transpired. Ivana's journey has come full circle, through trials, tears, and triumphs. She fought battles no one saw, but through it all, she stayed true to herself. The crowd outside the church, the whispers in the halls of Keller High, and the whispers of a nation that had watched her unfold her story, all of it was leading to this moment. But we're left with a question, a powerful one. What would you have done if you were Ivana? Would you have forgiven Reagan, the girl who tormented you, the one who turned your life upside down, just to bring you down? Or would you have let the bitterness, the anger, and the pain define your next move? Would you have walked away with grace, or would you have chosen revenge? Take a moment. Reflect on that. Because sometimes, the hardest decision isn't just standing up to the world, it's choosing to rise above it. And that's something Ivana knew deep in her soul. If this story moved you, inspired you, challenged you, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and share to your loved ones. There's so much more where this came from. Stories of strength, stories of overcoming, stories that'll make you rethink everything you know about life, faith, and what it means to truly fight. Remember, sometimes God hides his strongest soldiers in the quietest rooms. You might not see them coming, but when they rise, the world notices. Stay tuned. And always, never forget, sometimes, the quietest rooms hold the most powerful stories.